Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be trying some Doodle Hog supplies. How did I come across these supplies? One day I was on my computer doing some online shopping and I stumbled across this watercolor bundle set. It included 48 different brush pens, a package of water brush pens that you could fill with water, and a watercolor palette that included 36 half pans. What really interested me was that the whole thing cost around $30. Now, while that may sound expensive to some people depending on their budget, let me put this in perspective. If you simply wanted to buy their brush pens by themselves, it cost around $30 to $40, and I'm sure the water brush pens and palette of watercolors together cost a decent amount of money, so this was quite a deal. I decided to try these products out and see how they performed. I went ahead and swatched the watercolors off camera simply because of time's sake, and I usually work with watercolors. I loved how creamy and smooth the colors glided across the paper, and I loved how it soaked into the paper. They were bright and very pigmented, and I absolutely love how the watercolors did not have that chalky sort of texture when it dried on the paper like some watercolors do. Now, onto the watercolor brush pens. I was very excited to swatch these. I have only worked with watercolor brush pens once, so I was curious to see how they performed. I absolutely loved how much diversity in colors there were, and I loved how the creative names for the colors. They were very true to the description of the colors, and I was also surprised to find that instead of a nib, it was an actual brush with bristles. The other brush pens I have worked with only had a nib and not an actual brush, so I was really happy that I was working with something a little more familiar per se. The last thing I absolutely loved about these brush pens was the gradient that it created whenever I diluted it with water on the page. Another way you could incorporate the pigment per se in a piece is by adding some of it on a glass or plastic and picking it up with the brush. It makes it easier than putting it on the page beforehand and having to let the water soak on the pigment before you can dilute it on the page. I'm not going to show all of the footage of me swatching the brush pens simply because I realized it took a lot longer than I thought, and it would take a lot of time in the video, so I'm just going to cut it short and move on to the piece after this. I was very excited to try the water pens because I've never worked with them before until now. Basically, you open the cap, screw off the brush top, and fill the inside with water. When you squeeze it, water comes out. I really liked it because of the convenience and how portable it was. Also, it was a lot easier to clean because you simply had to squeeze the brush and the water rinsed off the pigment. Now I'm going to explain this piece. I drew the picture prior to the video simply because of time's sake, and also because this is more of a review and not necessarily a tutorial. The reason why I used fine liner pen was simply because I wasn't looking to make a realistic picture, but more of a surreal picture. I'm not quite sure what the meaning behind this piece is. I just kind of one day was sitting and I just thought to myself, what if you did some weird galaxy girl with a hole on top of her head with stars coming out of it? So there's no meaning behind it. I just did it for fun. In all reality, I honestly could not think of a picture to make with these watercolors for a while. And when I finally did get the idea, I thought these watercolors would be the perfect thing for this because of how vibrant they were. Now, it did take some getting used to using the water pens, but I really liked them. I thought they were really convenient and really easy to use after I got used to them. I'll definitely be using these again in the future. Now, I will not be using all of the watercolors and all of the brush pens, but I will be using all of the water brush pens, just because I wanted to get a feel of how much water they held and how they performed with my piece. I love how the brushes came in different sizes. I think they did a really good job with that, so I was able to put little details such as shadows or textures to the painting. And overall, I'm really happy with how this piece turned out because I just think the watercolors worked so well together. They blended out really nicely and they were so vibrant. They soaked into the paper. I just have so many positive things to say about these. Now, I'm going to stop talking for a bit so you can have some time to enjoy the painting. Now, this reddish pink color, I don't know the exact name for it at the moment, but I'm adding it to the cheeks and blending it out almost to the point you can barely see it, just to add a bit of blush to the cheeks. A general rule in portrait painting is that you should always add gray, like the slightest bit of gray, to the whites of the eyes, because no eyes are truly white, so it just makes it look a bit more realistic. And I know I wasn't going for realism, but I do want to make it, I'm not quite sure how to phrase it actually, but if you were to see this painting in person, if I didn't put the slightest hint of gray to the whites of the eyes, it would look kind of odd. Since I didn't really want to take the time to blend out the brush pens, I just decided to add them directly to the painting without blending them out. So I decided to add them to the hair and add a bit of texture. Now, how I draw hair is basically you have the base layer, which is the lightest layer, then you have the second layer, I don't know what to call it, basically it's just a color that's slightly darker than the base layer, and then you have the third layer, which is the darkest, and it helps put overall the texture into it, I guess. Now, since we're coming to a close to the video, I'm just gonna wrap up by saying my overall thoughts of all of these things. Now, I'll start with the watercolors. I loved how bright and creamy they were, and I was really happy with whenever I sprayed the colors with water. They activated really quick, and I was able to, within less than a few minutes, start my piece. The brush pens created such a nice gradient. They were also very vibrant and they had such diverse colors. And finally, the water pens were really convenient and held so much water, and I'm so happy with them overall. I would definitely recommend this. This is definitely worth the investment. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next video. Take it easy, guys.